Our next unit, Unit 14, is dealing with solutions. And solutions are things that we come across all the time, so we need to understand what they are. So a solution is defined as any substance that's evenly distributed throughout another substance. And so when we talk about a substance evenly spread out through another one, what are those? What's being spread out into what? Well, the two parts that make up a solution are the solvent and the solute. The solvent is a substance that's being dissolved, that does the dissolving, and the solute is a substance that gets dissolved. So solutes get dissolved, solvents do the dissolving. So what does dissolve mean? We've heard that word used in a bunch of different ways in our lives, probably. So what does dissolve mean? So the process of dissolving, when you see it, you have a solid, you put it in something else, and you see the solid just breaks apart. Well, the process specifically is when the solvent, the part that does the dissolving, breaks apart the solute into the things that make up the solute. So it is not a chemical reaction. It's just a physical process of a substance ripping apart another substance into the things that make it up. So here is a little picture of water coming in this little red and white particles that you have here, little cute little water molecules coming up to NaCl, salt, table salt. And Na is the small particle, and Cl is the larger blue-green looking particles. And it literally attracts it and pulls it away and breaks it apart. So whenever you have a solution that breaks another one apart, you have a solvent as water. That's what's called an aqueous solution. Now, we've seen and heard of these before, an aqueous solution. So whenever we have a solution, you have a part that does the dissolving and the part that gets dissolved. What is it that you've got that is able to be dissolved? How is that possible? Well, as we learned before, molecules can be polar or nonpolar. So whenever you have a solvent that's polar and it comes across a solute that's polar, then they can dissolve each other. Whenever you have a solvent that's nonpolar and a solute that's nonpolar, they can interact with each other. And when you have a lot of solvent, it can dissolve the solute. Whenever we have that, we call that miscible. It sounds like mixable, but we call it miscible. And whenever we have a substance that's a solute, that's like a solute, the solvent and solute are like each other, so the solvent can dissolve the solute. So they're like each other, so we use the phrase like dissolves like. And whenever you have a polar solvent and a nonpolar solute, they can't dissolve and mix into each other. And whenever you have a nonpolar solvent and a polar solute, they can't dissolve. So example of polar and polar, for example, like dissolving like, would be like milk and water. They interact with each other. It can water it down and break it apart, or salt and water. They're interacting with each other. Immiscible would be like oil and water. They don't interact with one another at all.